And as you all know, this is our logo. And I still think it is absolutely a wonderful logo that was evolved organically and was presented. And for the people that may want to read a little bit more about the symbolism in this logo, please do go to our website. You're going to hear, I think, especially how Jean-Ray interpreted it, Dr. Jean-Ray Jones, and the meaning behind this logo as well. So as most of you know, PATSA, or PATH SA, stands for Professional Association for Transgender Health South Africa. We still can't decide if it's PATSA, PATHSA, or PATH SA. So there's a lot of diversity, like we love to do in this work, and we can all share in that. So I asked tonight Elma and Ron to join me to just share a little bit more on the guidelines. Now, for the people that's not aware of it, the guidelines was officially incorporated and endorsed in October 2021. So it is still a very kind of a baby in this field. But I think this baby is quite a big baby in the sense of it's the first African, definitely the first South African, but the first African guideline for gender-affirming healthcare. And it was, in the end, published on the auspices of the HIV Clinician Society that helped us to lead this process. And there is a shorter version that is in a journal article, and then the expanded version was presented then for the first time in October 2021 at the HIV Clinician Society's conference. Just maybe for some interest sake, this is the people that endorsed it. So you'll see there's NGOs that endorsed it, and especially from civil society. And then we have also some groups from the more professional organizations that also endorsed it. And we're very fortunate to have all of these endorsements. Now, obviously, these endorsements are still open, so you are more than welcome if you're from other group or you have contact with other groups and you feel that your group would like to endorse it, to go to your group, have a look at the guidelines, and please let us know, because we are more than open to have more endorsements for this work. So the guideline development, you'll see there was a core committee. So Anastasia Thompson, Dr. Anastasia Thompson and myself, we were basically the joint chairs, where we then had Camilla Vatras, that is then the person that helped us, especially with the guidance and the editorials and putting everything together. She was from the HIV Clinician Society. We had Kevin Adams, Ron Adenau, Rutendo Botma, Lauren Yankovic, Elliot Kotsia, that I saw was also here tonight, Zamsomi Luvunu, and Kanyiso Matlala, that I also saw joining us earlier tonight, Savuka Matiela, Anil Padavatan, Mershon Pillay, that's also here, Dulcie Rakamaku, Matilda Thompson-Meyerberg, Francois Fenter, and then Elma de Vries, that's also here tonight. So this was the development committee. But what was quite different for us, and what we really tried to achieve, was this is not that it just started off during COVID. Now we're going to do a guideline because we're in lockdown or something. This has been coming for the last 5-6 years, that we found that there is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, SAHCS 7. They are currently working on SAHCS 8, so that's standards of care. It should come. But although that exists, it is not a guideline that always works within the global south, and definitely not in South Africa, and in all our contexts and all the challenges that we deal with on a daily basis. And we really felt that we need to have an African voice, decolonize this kind of work and get it that it makes sense in an African context. And so the last 5-6 years, that was a dream, a lot of discussions. But what also makes this guideline unique, it is not just the medical voice or the psychosocial voice that's coming through, but an incorporation of the voice of the trans and gender diverse person, the voice of our civil society organizations, our NPOs and our NGOs, and the voice of the clinician and the therapists. So it is a combined effort to come to this, in the end, the product or the guideline that we're going to share with you tonight. And I think that makes it very different, because quite often we talk about our trans and gender diverse clients, and some of us might be trans and gender diverse, and then people are going to talk about you. Oh, somebody's definitely talking with me currently. If I can maybe just ask you to mute yourself, or if I can ask Elma just to mute the others, please. Elma, can you maybe help us with muting that person, please? Right. So
I don't think I can. Maybe we can ask Carol. Carol, are you able
Carol,
to mute
are you
people?
holding the...
Yes, I am muting. No problem.
Oh, thank you,
Thank you,
Carol.
Carol.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So I think that is quite unique, is that we're not talking about the trans and gender diverse person, but we are talking along with, and quite crucially, to also place the trans and gender diverse person in the focus as the main driver of these guidelines. So you'll see in our development committee, a lot of us are trans and gender diverse and identifying as trans and gender diverse, and some are a little bit more in the closet about that, and that's also all okay. But it is important that that is our main focus, and not, again, this kind of, oh, the healthcare provider is the expert and we know absolutely everything about trans and gender diversity, because we don't. And even for myself, sitting on both sides, if we want to make it a kind of a binary concept, being trans and being a healthcare provider, there is also that awareness that I don't know everything in any case as well. And then you'll see at the bottom, we have contributors to this guideline, and thank you everybody that contributed. And I also saw some of you joining us here tonight. And I think that is also very important to understand that this guideline is from a medical side. We have surgeons, we have a kind of a psychosocial element coming through, we have a legal aspect coming in, people working in different contexts, being it in a more senior space where people congregate, being it a correctional services, hospital, clinic basis, and we brought all these people in to come and share their knowledges. So, what was the scope and purpose of the guideline? Well, it's to provide evidence-informed best practice recommendations to enable South African healthcare providers, including psychosocial and allied healthcare professionals, to offer quality, affirming services to trans and gender diverse clients. And I think we need to be very open and honest with ourselves that our track record has not been great. And even still now, there's a lot of abuse happening in the world of healthcare towards our trans and gender diverse people. And sometimes even just our own silence and not fighting and standing up for clients can be part of this abuse. And we need to do better. So in the end, yes, it's to provide support for trans and gender diverse clients to access healthcare, but it is also to really get people to deliver a service of care and a new way of understanding trans and gender diverse people from a basis of we don't know it all. And we need to learn from our trans and gender diverse people. So I'm not going to do in detail the methods. I mean, you can really read that. But it was very evidence-based. I think that was very important for all of us There were certain aspects like non-gatekeeping, depathologizing perspectives, using a participatory approach that centers on the client's agency and humanity, upholds their dignity. Those were very fundamental spaces that we moved from. And again, that whole idea that we can't just now go and say, right, this is South African-based ideas, and this is what we're sharing, and use all the global North ideas and their literature. We had to also go and dig and find the literature in South Africa. And after South Africa, we moved to Africa, then global South, and then only to global North. And that was part of this whole method, to become a voice from Africa. So we also had an extensive external peer review in the end. And that peer review, again, when we talk about that, it's not just healthcare providers, it was also a community review. We got amazing input there from members in the community that really sharpened this guideline. And then in the end, it was supported by the South African or Southern African HIV Clinicians Society. So just maybe an overview. So there is, in the gender-affirming healthcare, there's the following components. There's primary and preventative care. There's a psychosocial care. There's medical therapy. There's the gender-affirming surgery. We have voice and communication therapy. There's an aspect of hair removal, and then advice on the safe use of non-medical gender-affirming practices and peer support groups. And this is the components that we built this guidelines on. But now you've heard enough from my side. I'm rather going to move over, and we're going to talk tonight about the values that underpins these guidelines. And there I'm going to ask Ron and Alma to come in, and just to make it very interesting is I don't have the email in front of me of the things that you were going to speak about. So you'll have to please chip in, otherwise I don't want to speak the whole time, but that might happen. Because some of us like to have a bit more idea beforehand what we're speaking about, and then some others like to just speak about general. So I do tend to go that way. So apologies to the people that wanted a bit more context tonight that's speaking with me. So I believe affirmation is mine. And I think what is important here is to understand that a trans person and a gender diverse person is a person in their right to be. And to be cisgender is not the ultimate gender to be in this world. There's a lot of diversity in gender, but we know that we live in a cisnormative world, and we also know that certain people in the end think that the world is just driven by cisgender people, and that is how the world should be. No wonder it's cisnormative. But gender is much more fluid, it's much more diverse. It can be on a continuum, as you all know. It could be not even in a continuum, it can be out there. And we also know that some people don't even subscribe to any gender or the idea of gender. So when we see our clients, we need to affirm them for who they are. And we need to learn from them who they are and respect their identity. So in the end, we can't just assume a person when they walk in, oh, they must be trans-binary or they must be this. We can't just think that if a person is very effeminate, that they are, and it is assigned male at birth, the person, we can't just assume, oh, this person should not be in cisgender. It's about starting to learn, going out of these binaries, out of these cisnormative, heteronormative constructions, and start letting people be for who they are. So now I'm going to hand over to the next person to speak about dignity.
Thank you, Chris. That would be me, Ron. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for being here. So yeah, the second core value that was chosen on which this entire gender-affirming healthcare guideline has been situated is dignity. I think a value that's not unfamiliar to us, I mean, just understanding the Constitution and just kind of as it's articulated here, and as we know within our Constitution, that all people should have the right to dignity, and that this should be respected and protected. And just like within the Constitution, it was very important in the development of these gender-affirming guidelines that we then also acknowledge that people whose gender identity and gender expression fall outside of what is, the narrow societal norms, that there's a long history, both within the healthcare system and also within our communities and within our societies, that transgender and gender diverse persons' dignity is assaulted, if I can use that strong term, in so many spaces and in so many ways, through the reality that being trans or gender diverse, you can be stigmatized, you can face discrimination, even violence, prejudice, being made invisible, and in many ways, on a day-to-day basis, in many spaces where trans and gender diverse persons often navigate their lives, their lived experiences, and their world, they find themselves confronted by situations and experiences and are treated in ways that chip away at their dignity. And it was very important for us in the writing of these guidelines that we acknowledge that reality of the trans and gender diverse persons that these guidelines are meant to be putting in place, best practice, evidence-based, indigenized, decolonized guidelines that espouses and is intended, to contribute to ensuring that the dignity of trans and gender diverse persons are protected. What's also highlighted in the guidelines in the section is that the dignity of transgender community members are often undermined in interactions with institutions, including the healthcare system. And it was still so distressing for us while writing this guidelines and engaging with our the various stakeholders and contributors to these guidelines, and especially around kind of thinking about these values and thinking about dignity, the many examples of absolutely humiliating, undignified experiences that trans and gender diverse persons still today encounter on a day-to-day basis, be that at local primary healthcare clinics, be it in government hospitals, and be it in the private sector of healthcare. So clients frequently have these negative experiences within the healthcare system, such as the kind of things that were often highlighted was including having their identities repeatedly scrutinized and questioned, and not valuing and respecting the voice of and the truth of the trans and gender diverse client, where it is our role to listen and hear and let the trans and gender diverse client tell us who they are. And also experiences of being treated with with paternalism and condescension by healthcare providers. There were also many reports of public humiliation, experiencing negative value judgments because of who they are, and the choices that trans and gender diverse clients are needing to make purely so that they can live and be their true authentic selves, and even as simple as having their appropriate names and pronouns used. So being misgendered, having their dead names used in healthcare settings are just some of the undignified experiences that are still ongoing. And thus it was critically important that we centered and emphasized dignity to be an important value, and that ultimately in the way that these guidelines are implemented, they should be contributing to our trans and gender diverse clients having an experience of gender affirming healthcare where they come out maybe not just with their dignity only intact, but their dignity even amplified. Thanks, Cliff.
I think it's my turn next. Chris?
Indeed you are. I'm just trying to move the slideshow that for some, there we go.
Okay, right, there we go. Equity. So in 2006, the Yogyakarta Principles were accepted. That is about international human rights in terms of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression and sexual characteristics. And then 10 years later, they had the Yogyakarta Principles plus 10. And we love all these principles because it talks about all people are equal, should have equal access to basic human rights. And no one should be subjected to unfair discrimination, as Ron has described. And yeah, it's just things that really resonate with the intention of the guidelines. And yeah, another thing is the intersecting layers of discrimination that we need to be aware of, that the fact that somebody is trans or gender diverse might not be the only difficult thing in their life. There might be other challenges as well that can make people's lives really, really hard. And we need to be aware of where our clients are. There's lots of different oppressions. And it's our role as healthcare providers to challenge all forms of stigma, abuse, inequality, and oppression directed at the trans and gender diverse minority. So I think in the guidelines, it's aspirational. It's what would be the best health professional that one can find. And that is what we aspire to, that we will fight everything that is not in favor of our patients being respected and affirmed. I think Chris is going to talk about inclusion.
Thanks, Elma. And I think that whole idea that when we say we're going to fight, it is in the end that thing, and that leads to inclusion, that we fight with. So we know as healthcare providers that there are certain powers vested in us. The question is what we do with power. It does not mean we need to feel now guilty because there's certain powers within ourselves, but it is how do we serve the trans community. And when we say we're serving the trans community, it's not to decide how we're doing it, but to hear from them their needs of how they would like us to also serve, how they would like us to use this power, because in the end, we are equal partners. And equal partners doesn't mean also that now I have a right to decide on the other person's body. No, it's about people having the right to decide on their own bodies, and they can decide what healthcare they need, but we bring certain knowledges and certain insights that we have learned about through our own experiences, through our trainings, and we can provide this to the trans person for them to make their own decisions. So in the end, it is not only about between us and our trans clients, but it's also in a broader decision making. So if we talk about laws, if we talk about policies and guidelines. So although this is PATHSA, for example, is a professional organization, it does not mean trans people are excluded. It does not mean in the end, in this guidelines, we are talking about the other, as I also spoke about earlier. So it's about being together as a community of care. And then I'm going to try and change the slides again. Oh, there we go. And I'm handing back to the two of you.
Thanks. Informed consent is mine. Thanks, Chris. So with regards to, informed consent is, I mean, all the values are important. The informed consent value is I think, critically important because it was probably one of the critical decisions that was made by, you know, the team and the authors writing, and this position taken that we're going to situate these guidelines within an informed consent approach. But it's very important that we clarify what we mean by an informed consent approach within these guidelines, because historically there is still the challenge that you know, the informed consent is sometimes still perceived and seen as a form of gatekeeping. So that's something that we need to make very, very clear, that the way informed consent is conceptualized as a value within, sorry, my dogs have just decided, my husband's arrived home, so apologies, they're just greeting him. So informed consent, as it is understood as a value and a positionality within these guidelines, is articulated in the document in the following way. So healthcare providers and clients are seen as partners who work together in assisting the transgender client to make the choices and the decisions that they need to make for themselves. So it is informed consent with the intent of empowering the trans and gender diverse client. So it's the person-centered principle, you know, within the informed consent mindset. And it's, as I was alluding to earlier, it's informed consent not in the guise of gatekeeping on the part of the healthcare practitioner. It's about a healthcare practitioner needing to do due diligence in the clinical care of their transgender and gender diverse client, that you know, both the ethical and moral requirements of the healthcare practitioner is to make sure that your client is aware of all of their options and what all the possible consequences and factors are that need to be thought about and understood with regards to the options and the choices that are available to the trans and gender diverse person. So if I, as the clinician, have ensured that I am up to date with the latest evidence-based research, the latest best practice understanding, both internationally and within our own context, and that I ensure that in my journey alongside my client, that when it comes to informed consent, that when my client in the end makes the decisions that they believe is the correct decisions for themselves, I, as the healthcare practitioner, am confident that I have informed my client of all of the necessary factors that they need to consider so that they are empowered to make the decisions that are in their own best interest, and that they feel is what's necessary for them to move in the direction to be able to be their true, authentic selves in the world. So informed consent here is understood very strongly as about empowering the client, and also the respecting of the self-determination of the client, but that I, as the clinician, need to give my client all the necessary knowledge and information and tools so that when they enact their agency and they enact their self-determination, they're able to do so having been thoroughly and properly informed. Thank you, Chris.
Helma, so you think with the ethical principles.
Yeah, the informed consent was an interesting journey for us as a writing team, because one needs to balance the autonomy of the individual with the due diligence, as Ron said. And it's a process where the client and the healthcare provider work together. And it's a process that needs to happen properly in the best interest of the client, because we've seen internationally that there are young people who have transitioned and then they complain, but we weren't properly explained. We didn't know what we were in for. And we want people to understand, if you're going to go on a journey of transition, it's going to impact on so many things. It's not just the physical things. There's impact on relationships, on work, on documents. It's just that people need to have the information to make their own decision. And coming to the ethical principles, the autonomy is obviously a very important aspect, that we trust that our trans and gender diverse clients know themselves and they know what they need. But in the process, we need to make sure that we don't cause harm, that we benefit the client with access and not gatekeep. And justice, that there's fairness and equity, and distributive justice is a major problem in our country as well, where people who have money have better access to gender-affirming healthcare at the moment. And that is something that we need to work towards, that somebody's economic status doesn't determine whether they're able to access gender-affirming healthcare.
So our Ubuntu, the participatory approach, I think it's something where I work in KZN that we've seen working very well, is that idea that we all are part of a team, and not just a MDT team, but the trans and gender diverse person is there. And then even further, we bring in the family, because we can't forget that we have family, being it a partner, being it the person's children, being it the family, the parents. We need to bring everybody in. And furthermore, we need to then also reach out to our communities. And as trans and gender diverse people, there's a lot of work that we're doing the whole time with all the minority stress that is heaped on top of us and that we're experiencing, that we need to do. But also as healthcare providers, we need to start doing it. So it's not just in our offices that we are working, but it's also in our communities. And we need to understand and acknowledge that people are not these individuals that's just there. We are now treating them, or we are working along and being there. But it is also that there's community. And that is where change needs to happen as well. Because a lot of this that transphobia is caused out there. And this is where our clients, this is where the trans and gender diverse people live with us. And it is those systems that we need to challenge and change together as a collective. And then Batu Pele principles, Ron.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, so the working group also decided, when contemplating the values that we want to basically be the undergirth of these guidelines, was the awareness that the Batu Pele principles have already been in existence. For those of us that work in the various state context are often quite familiar with the Batu Pele principles. And when we looked at the Batu Pele principles and what they're about, it very quickly aligned with what the intention of the guidelines were, both from the the core principles and values that the Batu Pele principles. And so just so that we all know, so Batu Pele, the term means people first. And we've been talking about, being patient or client-centered, and the, putting the needs of the trans and gender diverse persons in the center, and the voice of the trans and gender diverse person needing to be the guiding voice of voices of the work that we're doing. So the fact that the Batu Pele principles were already an existing set of values and principles used and applied within the South African context, and especially nationwide within so many of our state organizations, it seemed like a very clear and almost obvious marriage because the Bachapela principles, again, speaks to an indigenized, affirmation and acknowledgement, and an indigenized view of how, when it comes to engaging with the delivery of service and the working with, persons in need of support and healthcare, that the Bachapela principles were as applicable to the intention of the gender-affirming healthcare guidelines that we were developing as they are within, and its intention as it presently exists within the South African state context. And it was a furthering also of the indigenizing of our lens and our values. So the 8 Bachapela principles, as we may know, aims to enhance the quality and the accessibility of services, and that is very much also the intention of these guidelines, by improving efficiency and accountability. And with efficiency, just to highlight that also means that for it to be efficient means it has to be, based on evidence, based, research. It has to be based on best practice, and it has to be based on the core wisdoms of the very unique particular context, which is South Africa and Africa. So although these principles stem from the South African government, in other words, or as I've highlighted, they are also applicable throughout. And I'm not going to unpack this, but the principles are, consultation. Everyone's voices are important. Everyone must be invited to the table. And as you will see in the way that these guidelines were in the end, the process was enacted. I think the Bachapela principle of consultation is clearly evident, both from who the core team were, the organizations and the entities that we approached to kind of affirm and endorse the guidelines, and all the various contributors. I think we've definitely shone in the Bachapela principle of consultation. Service standards, again, about quality of care, is central to that principle, the Bachapela principle, and also of these guidelines. Access, I think, we've spoken about that enough up until now. So the importance of access, and that, as Alma highlighted, that access should not be limited because of privilege and socioeconomic status, etc. Courtesy also speaks to the elements of dignity that we spoke about earlier. Information, what kind of the informed consent is kind of their synergy there, that the importance of not only that we inform our clients so that they're able to make the best choices and decisions for their own well-being and for their own self-actualization as trans and gender diverse persons, but and as the example from Simon's case, that we also need to be educating and informing our wider community and society, and empowering our families and our communities and our society at large with understanding gender diversity and gender identity. Openness and transparency, and redress. So redress is a bit more of the one of the more challenging, but absolutely that we need to get to a place, and hopefully with these guidelines in place, it will actually create the context where people can be held accountable for their practices, and that now clients can refer to the gender-affirming guidelines if they're engaging with a healthcare practitioner that's not following these guidelines. So the guidelines, in our view, actually would make possible the Bachapela principle of redress. And then the last is value of money, but basically it's that we want good quality
and standing squats and changing doll diapers. The focus of that class is just way off.
Yeah, the focus of that class is managing labor.
The focus of that class is
something playing in the background. Carol? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. This was bizarre. And then the last principle is, value for money, and that, that essentially public services and also all services should be provided economically and efficiently to all of our citizens. but that we need to, and especially in the South African context, and this was, I think, also one of the important reasons why we needed to develop South African specific guidelines as well, is that one of the huge challenges we have is that we have a huge need and limited resources, and that we really need to be thinking about how we utilize the resources that are available, and that ultimately that the resources are applied in a way that is beneficial to the wider citizenry, and in particularly in our context, to as many of our trans and gender diverse people as possible. Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Okay, and then we're going to move into trans-giftedness, and I think this might just be the first guideline that is bringing in trans-giftedness. And I think we're always so looking at what we should do and should put everything on, how we build our principles, how we build our approaches, how we build the guideline, that we sometimes forget what we're also receiving. And Elma, I think I'm going to ask you to speak about trans-giftedness, please.
Oh, so we wanted to have a South African guideline from a decolonizing approach, not just taking stuff from the West. But this term was coined by a doctor in Norway. Esther Espen Perelli Benestad is a trans doctor in Norway, and an activist, and also on the board of the World Association for Sexual Health, and an amazing human being who has done so much. And yeah, so Esther Espen coined this term of trans-giftedness because they believe that trans people bring something unique to the world. And if a child who is trans and gender diverse is affirmed and supported by their family and their context, they can be a gift. It doesn't have to be a burden to an individual to discover that they're trans or gender diverse. And the trans-giftedness is also a thing of coming from a strengths-based perspective. Trans and gender diverse people have so much to offer the world. And for us to see that it's not just, oh, these poor people. So one of our team members specifically wanted the wording in there that we don't want a condescending, undermining, or pitying of trans and gender diverse individuals. So at medical school, we would talk about, marginalized populations, but it's important to also see the trans-giftedness and the beauty and the strength. So I think that's, we are glad that we can incorporate this term, because we really wanted the guidelines to say, respect, we affirm you. I think I'll stop there, Chris. And then are you going to conclude, or do you want me to? Chris?
Sorry, I'm just trying to find myself. And Elma, I think before we conclude and move over to questions, I do see some of our core team here, and I wondered, Elliot, if there's maybe something you want to add before we wrap up, please.
Chris, thanks for the opportunity. I have nothing to add. Thanks. I think you covered the principles and the approach well.
Thanks, Elliot, and thanks for being here tonight. I also saw that Kanyisu that joined us with his expertise and experiences here. Kanyisu, would you like to add something maybe, or maybe just bring something to the conversation?
Thank you very much, Chris. Like Elliot, I don't have much to add. I think you guys have covered everything. I do want to say that the guidelines I think from my experience and obviously working in the environment that I'm working in currently, which is DCS, I think they are magnificent. It's a very wonderful document that I think will be well received by different departments. And I certainly do feel that this will make quite a big impact in the correctional facility, as it might be a good instrument to push towards, the introduction of hormone replacement therapy that we don't have in the South African context. So I just want to applaud the core team and all the contributors who worked, tirelessly, and on this document. I think it's a wonderful document, and I do feel it's going to make a tremendous impact in the community, especially in the South African context.
Thanks, Kanyesu. And I think what is also important for all of us to realize, and this is not the end of it. This is not the document in its final forever. It is a living document. There will be revisions, there will be change. I mean, we are working in a field with so much diversity, so much energy. Things are changing. So we're definitely going to do that. And then also, we still need to really spend some time with youth and with children. Those two, we haven't really broadened yet. And those are some of the next steps we need to take. And then I know, Mershon, you also here all the way from New Zealand. He couldn't get away from us. Maybe you would like to just add a little bit of ideas that you brought to the table for the guidelines.
I think thanks again for the opportunity, El, but I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add other than to say there's a section on voice and communication, which I think is critical in terms of looking at how these guidelines are used, and also because it represents a new area that may have not been fully included or considered in other guidelines before. So thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Mershon. Then, Alma, I'm handing back to you, and then, Ron, if you want to maybe also just create some space that we can have a little bit of a discussion. I know we're already running a bit late, but I don't want to only have our voices there. There are so much that we can learn. So, Alma, maybe just to bring it all together, and then Ron for the question section, please.
Yeah, I think bringing it together is affirmation. Affirmation of our clients, affirmation of our colleagues, and working together so that people can blossom as our logo has got the hands, so that people can blossom to be the amazing trans-gifted beings that they are. So there will be a bit of time for questions, which Ron will facilitate. So if anyone who wants a CPD point hasn't put their name and registration in the chat, please do it now. And then over to Ron for question time.
Thank you, Alma. So yeah, I mean, let's not make this overly formal. I think you've listened to the three of us rant very hopefully enthusiastically and excitedly about these very core values that were so critical in the thinking and that was in all of our minds in the development of these guidelines. So we're inviting any kind of, maybe not even questions, if anyone would like to give a reflection or make a comment either on what you heard this evening or even on the document itself. So feel free to kind of raise a hand and I'll hopefully try and see you. Alma, I see you, Alma Rudolph, that Alma. I see your hand is there. So please, yeah, we welcome your thoughts and your comments.
Thank you very much. I, in my capacity as the President of the Association for Sexual Health, I would like to congratulate you on what you did here. It is an absolutely phenomenal document. I see my computer is complaining that I've got too many things open here. Can you guys hear me, Ron? Or is it bad? No, you can. Okay, good. Now, so firstly, I would like to say that I'm sorry that I wasn't involved in producing the document because of COVID and organizing the World Congress. But I would really very much like to be involved when or in the review process and get some of the people in private practice at My Sexual Health to, also contribute. Not that I think that there's anything wrong with the document, but I went to put together our consent form that we will be using at My Sexual Health now, so I think that I've got some value to add in terms of the treatment, the actual prescribing the hormone therapy, because we've done so much of it. But yes, we as a group at My Sexual Health would be honored, absolutely honored to endorse what you guys have done, because although a few of the My Sexual Health members contributed, but officially we'd be very happy to endorse it. Then also with the pull that I have at SAHCS, I think we must just, because SAHCS didn't endorse it, am I right? They didn't officially endorse it.
Not yet, no.
Okay, so that should definitely come onto this weekend's agenda to make sure that SAHCS officially endorses it. And then from the World Association for Sexual Health, I would really like to officially endorse it. So obviously, what you realize when you become the president is that you think you have power, but it's actually like the General Assembly that has all of the power. But the reason why I think it's important that the World Association for Sexual Health endorses these guidelines is because it is applicable to all of Africa, to all of low income countries, and actually these guidelines are applicable in well-resourced environments as well. I really believe that. So, I mean, it is really a bit of a process for us to officially endorse it, but that's the kind of the stance that I would like to take. And I mean, I'm very involved with these kind of things, on a like organizational level. And if you think of how much effort and time has gone into WPATH bringing out the Standards of Care 8, and that you guys have the balls to produce guidelines before the Standards of Care 8 is out. I think that's pretty impressive, because, typically one would wait for the big organization to say, okay, this is what we think, and then add on what is applicable to our local context. But I love the fact that you guys really had the guts to go and say, we read the literature, we've got the lived experiences, we've got the clinical experiences, we know what's going on politically in this. We are going to bring out our guidelines even before Standards of Care 8 comes out. So well done. It's fantastic. I really think it's excellent. And we are working on a statement now to oppose what was said by the Australian and New Zealand psychiatry, where they said that they went back again and said, no, but mental health care is obligatory. And, it's one thing if a powerful organization like that says that in such a well-resourced environment, but to then make that applicable to the rest of the world is really dangerous, because you're going to sit with multiple people who are not going to access care because of that level of gatekeeping. So I think, we're already busy with that. So at that same point, we can endorse these guidelines and, put that forward as a good example. So yes, those are my comments. Again, I invited all of our Sexology Training Club people to come here. Thank you very much for allowing them to come in, and because I wanted them to hear out of the horse's mouth why you did it the way that you did it. And thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alna. So thank you for those affirmations, and thank you for those endorsements. We'll definitely follow you up on those. But I do wear two hats. I'm part of SAHCS and I'm part of PathSA, and I know that when Alna says she's going to do something, it happens. So thank you so much. And also, Alna, thank you for recognizing. I do think it really is important. And what you said now also resonated with what one of our African colleagues at WAS said in one of the sessions, where, yes, the South and Africa also has knowledge, also has expertise, also has wisdoms, also has lenses that can be obviously powerful and important for us in our particular context, but we can bring to the North and to the other parts of the world ways of thinking and understanding and perceiving that they may not yet have contemplated, because those are the lenses that we can put on the you know, on the table. And so thanks for affirming that as well. Any other comments, reflections, questions from our audience before we move towards the AGM? Just trying to look. Are we all digesting, thinking deeply and reflecting, all sitting in awe of this product and this work that went into it? All right, so I'm not seeing any hands or anyone jumping in. I hand back to you, Chris, as our chair.
Thank you very much. So thank you everybody for joining this evening.